Hi, folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast, Season 14, Episode 3. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Here we are once again. Great to have you with me. Thank you for joining me. Investing is definitely the most interesting part of personal finance. You know, budgeting can be a grind. Insurance is a necessity, of course, but it's hardly full of fun and hijinks. But investing is where you get to see your money grow and move and change over time. And eventually, of course, you'll build something which will enable you to live how you want to live. Getting started on that process is obviously really exciting, and today that's what I want to talk to you about. So after the main body of the show, as usual, I'll announce what we're talking about next time, read a review out from a listener on iTunes, and all that good stuff. But before any of that, remember, this podcast continues to be brought to you with the help of my friends at 7 Investment Management. They've been helping me out here on the show since the spring of 2011. Could not have got this far without them, so I'm really, really grateful to them. Please do check out what they're up to. They're at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. And don't forget the new Meaningful Money branded self-investment platform that those guys have set up. Loads more information on that at meaningfulmoney.tv/podcastinvest. I know that sounds like a bit of a weird link. Just means that I can track where you came from. So definitely check out that. Lots more information on that page, meaningfulmoney.tv/podcastinvest. Right. As well as questions about how to start investing and where to start putting money away, I get asked a lot about when to invest. And so that's what I want to get into today, really, to try and address that question. Remember, notes, links, all that good stuff. For every episode, there's always like a home base, which I call the show notes, right? So that's the only link you need to remember as we go through this. meaningfulmoney.tv/NA3 for new accumulators, episode 3. That's the name of this season. meaningfulmoney.tv/NA3. Let's pile in first to what you need to know. Okay, first thing you need to know is that investing is the only way to build wealth. Nobody gets rich by keeping money in the bank, right? Maybe back when interest rates were 5%, 6%, even higher sometimes, it might have made sense then to invest, in inverted commas, by keeping money in the bank. But since 2008, the perpetually low interest rates mean that your money just isn't going to grow if you leave it in the bank. I think it's important too to understand the difference between saving and investing. They are very different things. Saving is money kept in the bank. Investing involves converting that money into real assets. Much more to come on what I mean by that in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Real assets. Saving is short-term, figure on less than 3 years. Investing really is a medium to long-term game. At least 3 years, but can be as long as even 30, 40, or 50 years. Saving is about earning interest, okay? Investing is about getting what I call real return. So interest is where the bank pays you to make use of your money while you leave it with them. Okay? Whereas when you invest, you have the chance, depending on what it is you're investing into, to get both an income, interest, dividends, maybe rent if you buy a rental property. So you get interest and also have the actual value of the thing you own increase in value as well. All right, so it's a really important difference. You get 2 strings to your bow with real assets for the most part. More on that again in a couple of weeks. Saving is risk-free, or as near as damn it, right? Whereas any kind of investing involves a greater or lesser level of risk. Risk is a multi-layered thing, of course, and it's much more nuanced than you might think. It's not a case of, 100% safe or the risk of losing everything. There's a whole load of shades of grey in between that. So again, sorry to sound like a broken record, but I'll be dealing with a risk a little bit later in this season as well. So investing is different from saving, really, as night is from day. And investing is the only way to consistently build wealth over time. Okay? So I want to sort of get that in right at the start here. It's important as we build wealth and we start investing not to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. What do I mean by that? Well, one question I get asked all the time is about investing while still clearing debt. So let's say you've got some debt you're paying down and it costs you, say, 250 quid a month, something like that. But you've actually identified £500 a month that you can pay yourself first with. So should you double your debt repayments and get rid of it much faster, pay 500 quid a month against the debt instead of just 250, or should you stick with 250 quid towards the debt and invest £250? Well, it depends on how you approach this. It might make mathematical sense to split the payment. The thinking is that, okay, the money that you're investing each month is growing, maybe even faster than the interest that you're paying on the debt. Plus, it feels good to have some money building alongside while clearing the debt. But I don't really buy that. I like to be fairly compartmentalized with my finances. I try to encourage, folks on this show and also my clients to be fairly compartmentalized. And I reckon that you'll benefit from that. So I get the temptation to begin investing while still paying down debt. But I think you'll benefit from waiting and piling as much money as you can to clear any bad debt first. I'm not talking about mortgages and I'm not talking about student loans. I'm talking about credit cards, overdrafts, personal loans, that sort of stuff, which I identify as bad debt. So I would pay down the debt in double quick time in that scenario. I would pay the full 500 quid that I have identified as being available to pay myself first with. I would pay that down against the debt. And then when it's clear, not only will you get the amazing feeling of being debt-free, you'll also see your investment pot grow much faster because, of course, you'll have more money to throw at it, right? Don't worry about missing a market movement or anything like that. Market timing isn't going to make or break you in this regard. I would err towards clearing debt and then see your investments grow much more quickly. Remember also, don't just pay off your debt and then immediately start investing for the longer term stuff. You need to have an emergency fund in place. I think I dealt with that a couple of weeks ago, because what that does is it prevents the need to go into debt again if something unexpected happens. Having that buffer between you and the world, 3 to 6 months worth of outgoings, ideally, will really help you out and stop you having to divert money away from your investments just to pay off an unexpected bill. Okay, when you do begin investing, it's also important not to get too fancy too quickly. If you're a novice, you might be tempted by all kinds of interesting sounding options, right? And interesting things to put your money in. Your mate down the pub is telling you about the latest thing that he's bought, but he might be further along than you. Investing, in my view, is best kept very simple. Okay, I'll try to give you a bit more on that as we go through this. So don't take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Don't sort of divert or distribute your attention to more than one place. Pile money against debt first, then really pile money into investments. And don't take 2 steps forward and 1 step back by getting involved in stuff which is just too fancy for you at outset. Right? Going to put some flesh on the bones, of course. Just a few signs that you're ready, finally, in what you need to know. How do you know when you're ready to begin investing? The previous point gives you a hint, I think. When you're free from bad debt, that is anything except your mortgage and student loans, and when you have an emergency fund in place, that's a good time to start investing seriously. When you realize that you have a disposable amount of income each month or a lump sum of money that you don't have an immediate need for, that's a sign that you can start investing as well. The fact that you're listening to this podcast is a bit of a pointer as well. Maybe you're on the home straight with your debt repayment. You're trying to build some knowledge so that you can hit the ground running with your investing when you're done with the debt repayment. These are all really good signs that you're ready. It might be that you're already investing, of course, and most likely that might be through a workplace pension, even if you haven't paid off all your debt. If so, then you can apply much of what you'll learn in this season in that investing vehicle, in your workplace pension. Okay? So the magic really happens, I think, when you take money that until now you've been using to clear debt, or that you've been building an emergency fund, or maybe that you've just been enjoying, stroke wasting. When you've now got a strong desire to put that money to work, that's when the magic really starts to happen. It's definitely a mindset thing. And actually, I think you'll know when you're ready. Okay? So those things in mind, let's have a look at what you need to do. Okay, we've got a few things here, actually. Let me just scroll down and have a look. Yeah, we got 5 things and a little bit of detail. So the first thing you need to do is to commit to a learning process. Plenty of people have piled into their investments far too quickly without being prepared, I think. As I said earlier, investing should be kept simple, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy to get your head around when you're starting out. So you're going to need to commit to learning what it's all about, learn what you can about it, and unsurprisingly, I've got a few resources for you to do that. Firstly, in a fit of self-serving, let me point you towards my own course. It's called Learn How to Invest, staggeringly inventive name, and it's at learnhowtoinvest.co.uk. In that course, I cover everything you need to know to get started, more depth than I can ever do here on the podcast. You'll learn about the different assets, how to blend them together to build a portfolio. You'll watch over my shoulder as I use the free tools over at Morningstar to research what funds I might invest in, and then you'll learn when and how to review your investments over time. I've had more than 200 people go through the course. The reviews are excellent. So check it out at learnhowtoinvest.co.uk. If you do decide to sign up, there's a coupon code, podcast25, all one word. If you put that in at sign up, you get 25 quid off, takes the cost down to 150 quid. This is great value, folks, because this is the sort of platform that you're going to build your wealth on. So getting some good information right at the start is really going to serve you well. Also, worth bearing in mind that if you sign up to Learn How to Invest, you will be grandfathered into the new Meaningful Academy when that is eventually launched. It's a massive piece of work, that, so I appreciate your patience. I'm getting asked about it all the time because I've been mentioning it for months now, but it is going to be worth the wait, I promise. But if you sign up to Learn How to Invest, you'll get grandfathered in at no extra cost, right? So, learnhowtoinvest.co.uk, use the coupon code podcast25 to get 25 quid off. All right. So that said, there's a couple of books you need to read. The first is Investing Demystified by Lars Kroyer. I chatted with Lars a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. So listen back if you haven't done that. You really get a sense of the man and his views on investing, and he really does simplify it for you. Second, if you can get a copy, read Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth by Nick Murray. I haven't yet interviewed Nick, but I'm hoping to do so maybe at some point. He's a bit of a legend, so it's one of those, would he really come on this show? But, Lars Kroyer did, so who knows? So read those two books, Investing Demystified by Lars Kroyer, Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth by Nick Murray. Links in the show notes, of course, but you're not done yet, right? You're going to need to commit to continual learning. Obviously, podcasts like this are a great resource. Maven Money and Money to the Masses, they're also great listens, have a real bent towards investing as well. So definitely check those out if you haven't already. Links to everything, of course, in the show notes. All right, so commit to learning. It's going to be a long process, but it's worth it. Secondly, keep cash to a minimum. I said earlier that investing is the only way to build wealth for the long term. So it stands to reason then that you need to keep as little money in cash as you can. Any unnecessary money held in the bank or building society is money which isn't really growing for your future. So how much should you keep in cash? Well, obviously your emergency fund, that's the whole point. Should be between 3 and 6 months of your regular monthly outgoings, not really including luxuries, just what you need to survive if for whatever reason your income was to stop, right? Or to cover an unexpected bill. If you're in a secure employed position, maybe you're working in the public sector, you might have heard a car beeping its horn outside my window there. If you're in a secure employed position, perhaps the public sector, you can maybe err towards a 3-month emergency fund. If you work for yourself, or if you're in any doubt at all about the security of your job, then err towards having a bigger emergency fund, maybe 6 months worth of expenses. So you should obviously keep that in cash. On top of your emergency fund, you need to keep in cash any money that you think you're going to need to spend in the next 2, maybe even 3 years. This is particularly true if the money you need to spend needs to be at least a certain level and can't be any lower. So if you've got a budget for a wedding, say, 18 months from now, and you've budgeted at 15 grand for that wedding, the last thing you would need is for the money to only be worth 12,500 because you've put it in the market and there's been a market dip right as you need the money. That's why you should never invest money which you're going to need in the short term. It's just not worth taking the risk of that money not being there when you need it. So don't keep any more cash than you absolutely need to. All right, emergency fund and money you're going to need in the next 2 to 3 years. So where should you keep it though? Remember, this money is not about making you rich. So the interest rate really isn't a major factor, I would venture. Probably more important is security and accessibility. Of course, it makes sense to get the best rate you can, right? There's no point throwing money away. But weigh this against maybe the hassle of opening an account with a new provider, all the sort of money laundering hoops you have to jump through to do that. And question whether it really does make sense to shop around for an extra 0.1% on what will be a relatively small amount of money. You want, obviously, your emergency fund to be immediately accessible. So for the best place is usually a savings account which is linked to your current account, or at least where you can log on and move money immediately. When it comes to money saved for an event in maybe 2 or 3 years' time, you might decide that actually you can lock that up a little bit, maybe for a year or so. And you'll probably attract a slightly higher rate of interest by doing that, but you'll have limited access to the money. That's okay if your timescales work out. A cash ISA isn't a bad bet. It can cause problems if this is joint money with your partner, though, because you can't have a joint ISA. Chances are any interest you might get paid will fall well within your savings allowance, a little tax-free allowance you get for the first £500 or £1,000 worth of interest that you paid is tax-free, depending on your tax-paying status. So really, the tax benefits of a cash ISA are largely moot. I would suggest it's better to keep your ISA allowance available for stocks and shares ISAs once you start investing proper, or a lifetime ISA, of course. So keep as little cash as possible. Just your emergency fund and money you're going to need in the next 2 or 3 years, and no more. The rest needs to be invested. So the next thing you need to do is to set your investment budget. All right. So once you've identified how much cash you need to keep in reserve, you can work out how much you can invest. It might be a lump sum. Perhaps you've had a bit of a windfall. More likely, for many of us, it'll be a regular monthly amount. So let's just say, for the purposes of this example, that's £500 a month, say. All right. How should you invest that? By which I mean, where should you invest it? What kind of account? I remain convinced that for most of us, there's only really 2 kinds of accounts that matter. The first is a pension, okay? And for many of us, that will be available through our employer. If you're self-employed or if you don't qualify for a workplace pension for whatever reason, just set up a personal pension. Doesn't need to be fancy, just, a simple online pension. There's loads of options for that. And the second kind of account, other than the pension, of course, as I've alluded to already, is the ISA, individual savings account. So I've covered the differences and similarities between these 2 accounts before. I don't really want to duplicate that again here. But how would you split your £500 a month, say, between those accounts? Well, if you're just starting out, it's likely that there's going to be quite some time before you can access money in a pension, right? Because the earliest you can do that is age 55. Depends how old you are, of course. It makes sense, therefore, to tilt the balance of your investing towards your ISA when you're starting out, I believe. So maybe, and this is just an indication, maybe you split the investments £300 into the ISA, £200 into your pension, or £350 into the ISA, £150 into the pension. You decide, right? There's no right or wrong here. It's just a starting point. As your ISA savings build up, you can begin to shift the balance towards your pension savings. Eventually, you'll reach the point where you can't really imagine any eventuality where you need access to both your emergency fund and the accessible money you've got in ISAs. So you might as well really punch things towards your pension and shift the emphasis there. Pensions will always work out mathematically. They're always better mathematically. Sorry about that. Just because of the simple expediency of tax relief. The government gives you money to invest in a pension. Yes, pensions are taxed on the way out when you eventually do take an income. That's why having an ISA is also important, because you can sort of plan where you take money from. But pensions these days are incredibly flexible. I'm talking a little bit more next week about planning where you save and invest, so stay tuned for that. I've got a little sort of sub-point, 3B, right? Point 3B under what you need to do is about divvying up the money between you if you're in a relationship. So if you're not, if you're on your own, then you can just skip this a little bit. It's not very long. But if you are in a relationship, I think it's important to maintain some kind of harmony and balance in your finances. Now, each couple is going to need to work this out to an extent which serves their unique needs and their unique relationship. Tax is definitely a factor, of course. So if one partner is a higher or an additional rate taxpayer and the other one is a basic or even a non-taxpayer, that might well sway your investing decisions. The high rate taxpayer will get more tax relief on their pensions, potentially get more benefit from an ISA too. But tax reasons aside, try to ensure that one partner isn't being sidelined, okay, particularly if there's inequity in earnings, right? It's really important that both partners feel a part of this. It's worth mentioning that in a divorce, everything is fair game anyway. So it's not about sort of my money and their money necessarily, particularly obviously if you're married or if you're in a civil partnership. So just bear this stuff in mind and try to talk about it. Not easy, some of these conversations, I know. If you're already wondering about how things might be divvied up should you break up, then maybe there's bigger issues at stake, but it is a factor, no question. Try to keep your discussions about this stuff open, honest, non-judgmental. Try to work together towards your common goals. Obviously, optimize for tax for sure, but optimize for relational harmony as well. Let's just call it that. Okay, so that's it for that bit, right? Just worth mentioning that, I think. Next thing you need to do is to just crack on, get started. So once you've established your emergency fund, identified the budget that you've got to put aside, and you've chosen how to split your investment amount between accounts and longer and medium-term stuff, you're ready to push the button, crack on. So this means you're going to need to choose a fund in which to invest. Now, regular listeners will know my suggestion for most investors is that passive multi-asset funds are a great place to start. So I did a podcast episode on how to find such funds back in season 4. I'll put a link to that in the notes. Again, my conversation with Lars Kroyer a few weeks ago, he recommends an even simpler approach, opting basically for a global equity index tracker. Listen back to my conversation with Lars, some great stuff in there. One of the fastest downloaded episodes ever, that. So more people downloaded that in a shorter time than pretty much any other episode. So really popular one. We're going to talk about risk in a couple of weeks, but if you haven't already, definitely take a formal risk tolerance assessment. The best place I know to get that done is meaningfulmoney.tv/myrisktolerance. Again, I'll make sure there's a link to that in the show notes. It'll cost you, though. It costs 30 quid a head to do, but it's so worth paying to get this done properly at outset. Be wary of free risk profiling tools online. They often have a vested interest in steering you towards a particular kind of investment. The Finametrica one that I'm just talking about that I'll link to is independent and it's scientifically robust, which I like. There are two main ways you can get started as an investor. Okay, firstly, you can sign up to one of the websites which invest for you, depending on your risk profile. So they will take care of things like asset allocation, how much is invested in what kind of thing, rebalancing between those different allocations, tweaking your investments as they go along. All that stuff gets done for you. Just pay in your money, fire and forget. Simple as that. My buddy Damien Fay over at Money to the Masses, he's got reviews on many of these sites. They're often called robo-advisors, which is a huge misnomer in my book. But I'll put a link to some of Damien's reviews in the show notes because he spent a lot of time going over that, which I haven't. So definitely worth reading that stuff. Those basically do it for you. You tell it what your risk profile is, and they will invest for you. Another quick plug here for the recently launched self-investment platform that my longtime sponsors at 7IM have built. They've branded it with Meaningful Money as well, which is pretty cool. But what this system does, it enables you to determine how much of your lump sum or your monthly savings should be invested according to which risk profile. So you can tell it, I want half of it to be moderately cautious and half of it to be adventurous or whatever. And then the system takes that blend of assets and shows you how it has performed in the past and some suggestions as to how it might perform in the future. Past performance, no guide to future performance, and all that jazz. But definitely check it out, and you can mess with the risk allocations, all that sort of stuff, before you even have to put any details in. So definitely try that. meaningfulmoney.tv/podcastinvest for more information, all the disclaimers, and some FAQs on that, right? So you can do one of these robo-advisors things. The sort of middle ground is the self-invest platform I've just been talking about. Or you can sign up to any online investment platform and choose your own funds, right? Again, I did a podcast session on how to choose a multi-asset fund. When it comes to choosing a platform, my good friends at the Langcat Consultancy, they have a free guide on how to do that. So I'll put a link in the notes, right? So this process of getting started sounds like there's a lot of detail there, but really it's quite simple. Determine your risk profile. Choose your account, pension, ISA, or whatever. Choose the provider of that account. And if you are using an investment fund platform where you choose your own funds, then you'll need to choose a fund, okay? So that might seem daunting, but if you take it a step at a time, you will be fine. I've got a cheat sheet available at the show notes. It'll walk you through the steps and provide the links that you need to start off right. One sheet download. Okay, so you download it and work through it, and that'll set you up on the right track. So number 5, last thing you need to do is to set a date then for review. I think it makes sense to review how things are going fairly early on as a new investor. In my Learn How to Invest course, I suggest a formal review once a year and only checking in on your portfolio once a month. And I literally mean just checking in. What's it worth? We're not making any changes. It's vital, actually, that you don't tinker too much, but instead leave the portfolio to do its thing over time. So as a new investor, I suggest that 3 months after you begin investing regularly, or after investing your first lump sum, you sit down and ask yourself the following questions. You ready for these? Firstly, am I happy with the split between accounts? Chances are you won't change anything too often with any of these questions, actually, but it will provide an opportunity to review the total amount being invested. Can you squeeze an extra 50 or 60 or 100 quid out of your budget to invest? You'll find you'll get a taste for it once you've started. So it's an opportunity to look at that again. And of course, how that might be apportioned between accounts or between risk profiles. Second question, am I happy with my chosen risk profile? 3 months isn't long to experience the ups and downs of the stock market. So if you have a really difficult 3 months and your money's worth less than you put in, you might be tempted to change your risk profile and dial it down a bit. Don't do that. I strongly urge you not to do that. We're going to talk about behavior later in the season. But as you become more proficient as an investor, you'll come to understand that your risk profile is actually a very high-level concept. Of more on-the-ground importance is the general trajectory of your portfolio over time. So don't panic and freak out with 3 months of bad numbers. Okay, that's the danger of checking in too regularly. You can ask yourself, am I happy with my chosen platform or provider? Really, this comes down to ease of use, perhaps the availability of an app for your phone, how the reports are laid out, can you make sense of them, stuff like that. It might take longer than 3 months for these annoyances to come to the fore, but it might not. So remember that shifting between accounts and platforms is easier than ever. So you don't feel like you don't have to feel like you're stuck with your original choice if you think there might be better out there. Always be careful of fees though. When it comes to selling down assets, transferring to another provider, make sure you know what the fees are. And finally, ask yourself, am I happy with my chosen fund? Again, 3 months isn't long to pick up any issues with your chosen funds, but maybe you've been considering alternatives as your knowledge and your understanding grows. Perhaps you can use this opportunity to maybe shift your investment, maybe divvy it up between that, your first fund and a second one, perhaps add that into the mix. So this initial 3-month review needn't take long. Chances are you'll make 0 changes, but I think it's important to set a date just to look at things. And if you're happy with how things are going, maybe the next review can be at the anniversary of when you started, 1 year on. Or if something significant happens like a windfall, change in your employment situation, whatever. Review things intentionally and proactively as often as you need to, but not too often. Really important. So we've covered the basics today, and we're going to continue to build on these as the season progresses. Okay, so we've covered the basics today, and we'll continue to build on those as the season progresses. And I've intentionally kept things fairly light on the pretty meaty subjects of risk tolerance and capacity for loss, investing behavior, stuff like that, because we're coming back to those later on in this season in much more depth. But if anything I've said today raises any questions, a couple of places you can go. You can either leave them at the show notes, meaningformoney.tv/NA3 for new accumulators 3, or you can dive into the Facebook group, right? meaningformoney.tv/community. Well over 1,300 people in there now, people asking questions every day and getting amazing answers from the community. I'm in there as well, obviously, but getting some fantastic answers and a really great atmosphere where everybody's trying to help each other learn and grow. So definitely check that out, meaningformoney.tv/community. Okay, this is a review from Susie, who says, 6 years off retirement, panic. Having spent a lifetime of putting off saving, spending what I earn, mostly because I don't have any spare cash to shove into pensions or savings, and I now realize I'm not set up for living a retirement lifestyle that I'd like. I needed to do some research, and I stumbled across Pete's Meaningful Money podcasts. Whilst there are lots of podcasts providing info on investing, property, etc., way out of my league, I found the more basic guides to saving, debt management, pension investigation really, really helpful, and Pete has helped me start the process of managing my hard-earned money even more carefully than I currently do, in order to get me to a better place when I retire from my current full-time work. Currently working through the budget planning spreadsheet that Pete shared with his audience back in 2015-16, and me being a bit of a duffer with numbers, found the spreadsheet with all the formulas pre-populated really good. Slowly but surely, with Pete's help, I hope to be in a better position this time next year as far as my finances are concerned. I'm never going to be rich, I've left it too late, but hopefully managing my finances better will mean I can stop worrying so much. Thanks, Pete. Susie, all power to you. It isn't too late. Yeah, you might not be as rich as you'd like to be, but you will definitely benefit from every minute you spend being intentional about your finances and putting money away for the future, even now. Okay, so more power to you. Keep going, for goodness sake. If you want to leave me a review, just like Susie did, meaningfulmoney.tv/iTunes, or wherever you're listening to this podcast, just leave a review. All right, if you're on Android or whatever, any way you can leave a review, do it. It really helps me out. Okay, don't forget that all through this season, there is an email address for you to send any questions to me. And at the end of the season, episode 10, I'll be putting together a Q&A show. So the email address to send me your questions is season14@meaningfulmoney.tv. Definitely do that. It'll really help me collate answers to the right kind of questions for folks at the end of the season, because inevitably I get a bunch of people asking similar things as we go through. So season14@meaningfulmoney.tv is the email address to send that to. Now, next time we're going to be talking about planning, setting some goals for your investing journey, and how to sort of apply those plans in real life. Okay, so it's a good session next week. Remember, any comments on today's show at the show notes, NA3, meaningfulmoney.tv/new accumulators. No, come on. meaningfulmoney.tv/NA3. Get it right, boy. Okay, that's it, folks. Another session is done, 33 odd minutes in, something like that. Thank you for joining me once again. Any questions for this season, season14@meaningfulmoney.tv. Really appreciate you joining me and your ongoing support, getting a great response to this season. So thank you so much for that. Keep listening, and I'll talk to you next week.